All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Take your seats. Wow, what an amazing turnout this year. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rebecca Jewett. I'm the president and CEO of Palmer Land Conservancy, and I am just so thrilled to welcome you all to our 9th annual TENACITY Women in Conservation. Woo! This is the biggest crowd we've had in 9 years. This is the largest panel we've had in 9 years. It just keeps getting bigger and better. And in fact, it started 9 years ago as a little backyard gathering with a handful of women involved with Palmer Land Conservancy. And to see it now grow into this is just tremendous. This is one of our signature events now every year, and we keep doing it because you all keep saying it is such an inspirational evening. I always learn something. Please keep doing it. So we are just thrilled to have you all here tonight. Before we get started, I have a handful of incredibly important thank yous. So first, to our sponsors. Without our evening sponsors tonight, we simply couldn't do this. They help underwrite the cost of the event and bring us this incredible venue, which we then get to invite you all to become a part of. So let me read our list of sponsors. Please hold your applause until the very end. Lyda Philanthropies, Intentional Wealth Strategies, the Colorado Lottery, Griffis Blessing, GEI Consultants, Great Big Good, and the Intuitive Wildlife Photography Method. Let's give all of them a wonderful round of applause. Next, I'd like to thank our board of trustees and also our past trustees, who we call our emeritus trustees. Our board is truly the engine behind incredible leadership since 1977. And I know many of you are in the room, so if you want to give a quick wave, but thank you all to those currently serving and those who have served on our board in the past. Also, speaking of leadership, we have an amazing Women in Conservation Committee. They are the ones whose great ideas brought tonight's programming, many of our speakers, and who overall worked with my team to ensure an incredible evening program tonight. So if you are on our committee, pop your hand in the air and we'd like to recognize you all. And finally, last but certainly not least, is my incredible team, the staff who day in and day out work on land and water protection and conservation, and who put incredible events like this on tonight. And in particular, this event was made possible by our philanthropy team, including Carrie, Astrid, Nicole, Wes, Julia, and Brandy. You guys are amazing. Let's thank them. So every year we like to choose a theme, and tonight's theme is connection. And there's two pieces to this theme I want you to think about, and think about especially as we have this conversation up here. The first is connecting people in our communities to the work of conservation. Land and water conservation is happening all around us. It is partly why we have amazing views, incredible wildlife habitat, trails, strong agriculture. Conservation is so important, but lots of people don't know about it. So it's connecting people to conservation. But the other theme around connection is recognizing that conservation is a connector of people and connector of communities beyond the land and water protection itself. And for many years, the last 10 years at Palmer in particular, we have focused on the role that people play in creating strong conservation. And historically, when we talk about conservation, it's often focused on land and water protection, the natural resource protection. But as we have dug into this work deeper and deeper, We realize people make it happen. And the real power of conservation is connecting people through a joint mission. It's that love of food, it's love of culture, it's that sense of place, and it's all those ingredients that make Colorado an amazing place to live. So conservation as the hub of connection, whether you see it as conservation or not, it's a through line to so many of the things that make this a special place. So thinking about connection through that lens of conservation and community is my ask of you tonight as we move forward. There are many familiar faces in this room, and welcome back. There are also lots of new faces, and to you, I say welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us tonight. Coloradans generally support the ideals and the values of conservation, but we also find that not everyone necessarily overtly identifies as a conservationist. So that's something we're going to continue to explore tonight as well. So conservation, community, and connection. With that, I want to turn to our incredible panel who are joining us from Colorado Springs, Pueblo, and Denver. We have the I-25 corridor well represented. We could give you the traffic report north and south of here. Well, let's give a welcome to our panelists. So I'd like to first start with introductions and to have each of you answer 2 questions. 1, in your own words, tell us what you do. Take that in whatever direction you want. And 2, do you identify as a conservationist? Why or why not? And there are no wrong answers here. Yenny, we'll start with you.
So hello, my name is Yenny Espinosa Nino, and I work for the Boys and Girls Club at Pueblo County. Just a simple description of my job is get kids outdoors, introduce them to environmental education, new experiences. We've taken kids skiing, hiking, biking, fishing, whitewater rafting, overnight trips. I just help organize all those experiences. And I do identify as a conservationist. When I was really young in high school, I worked for these conservation corps, and that really inspired my passion to preserve natural spaces. And then I worked in the fishing industry as a scientist, specifically focusing on data and bycatch for fisheries management. And now I feel like as an education specialist, I really, instill that with our youth that go through Boys and Girls Club and all the programs we run.
Good evening. My name is Patience Kabwasa, and it is one of the incredible honors of my life to serve as Executive Director of Food to Power here in Colorado Springs. You might know us formally as Colorado Springs Food Rescue. We evolved as an organization from rescuing and rediverting food to a full-fledged community urban farm that grows food in the hillside community and has programs that span from seed all the way to compost. What that looks like is last year, we were able to redivert about 400,000 pounds of fresh food and put it into the hands and on the tables of families, equating at about $1.4 million. So that's a big deal when you're talking about how much food costs today. Serving over 35,000 unique individuals collectively across all our programs in the city, over 100,000 people. And so fresh food, we believe fundamentally is a human right and everyone should have access to it, but it's also a pathway to community resilience and power. And so it's my honor to lead that work. What does that look like on the day-to-day? A little bit of everything. It could be composting, it could be fundraising, it could be talking to you all about our work, but it is community work that all of us participate in one way or another. And so I am so happy to be on this panel tonight, particularly in El Paso County, with such an incredible group of diverse women in this space, which is not something that you see every day. And so love to hear from these ladies about the work that they're doing, but and also talk with you all and continue this conversation on how we all become connected in this work, because community connection really is at the center of it. Do I consider myself a conservationalist? I think when I was, on my own journey of how I entered into the path of this work, I was a single mom, doing the best that she could to feed her kids and to feed them well. And I did that through being able to have space at my church and learned how to grow food from an elder. And through that journey, I really was able to connect with my familiar roots. So my father is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He migrated here in the 1970s. My grandmother grew food as a way of life, taught that to her children. And in my journey of struggle and survival, that realization just birthed up inside of me, and being able to have relationship in a reciprocal way with the land that connects you into community through cultural relevance of just exchanging food and being able to feel good about what I grew and share absolutely is a conservationalist. And so I only say that to say that often in these spaces, they can be very homogenous and there's lots of barriers to this conversation. And I really appreciate you asking that question, because I think that's part of the work is we need to cut down the barriers, decentralize this conversation. If you eat and you have relationship with food, learning reciprocity with the land is a part of all of our stewardship. And so we are all conservationalists.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Susan Daggett, and thank you so much to the Palmer Land Conservancy for putting on this event. It's my first time, and it's really a thrill to be here and to know that this is happening. It's really great. I have a complicated and rich history that has landed me at the University of Denver Law School, where I am on the faculty teaching land use and sustainability, and where I direct a tiny policy institute called the Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute, where I mostly focus on smart growth, urban sustainability, housing, transportation, affordability, some conservation, but it's really, I think a lot about how we human beings organize ourselves in community and how we physically occupy space, and what that means for our ability to thrive, for our place in our communities, for our impact on the planet, and our impact on our neighboring communities, our neighbors, our local environments. And so, but I started as a litigator for earth justice doing big public land. And so it really is, it's a very long distance in some ways from working in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and thinking about really big landscape conservation scale work to thinking about zoning and land use in a neighborhood. But I promise you that there is a through line there. I'll talk about that some in a little bit, but at heart, yes, I am a conservationist. I think that how we live, how we get around, how we organize ourselves in our cities, in our towns, and our communities has everything to do with whether or not we are creating healthy places, whether or not we are creating sustainable food systems, whether or not we are preserving biodiversity, whether we are protecting our outdoor spaces for recreation. And so I have become a very committed urbanist because of my conservation roots.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Anna Cordova. It's an honor to be here this evening with you all. When I was reading the bios of everybody else, I thought, wow, so powerful women up here. It's an honor to be up here with you all. I work for Colorado Springs Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services. I am the lead archaeologist, and I'm also the manager of Garden of the Gods Park. So what do? I feel like I do a lot of things. It's never boring. There's always something interesting going on. There's always a challenge. There's always learning opportunities. As manager of Garden of the Gods Park, I oversee a full staff of rangers and maintenance techs in the park itself. I also oversee our interpretive staff that works out of the Garden of the Gods Visitor and Nature Center. And then I oversee Rockledge Ranch, which a lot of people actually haven't even heard of. And it's right next to a park that sees over 5 million visitors a year. That's our living history area where we have a working ranch, and we grow food there. We interpret the past, and we try to connect people to the land. And that's what we do. That is our entire goal for all of it. A lot of people love and know Garden of the Gods Park. But our big goal, of course, is always education and connection. How do we connect people to this place so that they care for it? Those learning opportunities are so huge. And of course, it's also a lot of reaching out to different stakeholders. We have a lot of stakeholders. Lots and lots of people care about Garden of the Gods Park, which is amazing. And it's something that we need to take full opportunity on, because it is only one special place in the world. And so, but it's our special place here in Colorado Springs. And so it's a big job. If I think about it too hard, I don't sleep at night. So, but it really is such a huge thing. The other role as lead archaeologist is varied. I've been doing that for 9 years as part of the city of Colorado Springs. I am the first archaeologist that the city hired. Municipal archaeology is fairly unique. I've been doing archaeology for over 20 years. I did archaeology in Wyoming and Colorado. I'm a local graduate of UCCS, both my undergrad and my master's degree. But I've worked in Hawaii. I've worked in several places. My background, my mother is Irish. I'm sure that's the first thing you thought when you looked at me. But on my dad's side, I have indigenous roots in the San Luis Valley. My dad is part Navajo and a couple of Pueblos as well, and also Spanish. So I also identify as Chicana, which really recognizes those indigenous roots. And so for me, as a young archaeologist, I knew I wanted to do archaeology right away, from high school age at least. And so I've always wanted to connect indigenous voices and indigenous perspectives in not only archaeology, but also conservation. And so I worked in Hawaii for about 6.5 years. The reason I chose that was because as a young undergraduate, I didn't see a lot of indigenous voices in archaeology, except for in Hawaii. And they're kind of ahead of the game in conservation in all kinds of ways. And so I do in archaeology, we're all about cultural and historic preservation. And so I do a lot of just like surveying of properties to make sure that what we're doing is not impacting. So I work for all of the parks in that sense in Colorado Springs. And so we do surveys and things like that. We do a lot of public outreach, trying to connect people, children, adults, all ages to archaeology. A lot of people, for me, that's a tool. Archaeology is interesting, fascinating for a lot of people. And if I can connect people with archaeology and I can connect them with the places that we find the archaeology, the more invested people are, the more they care about it. And so that's my goal overall in my entire job. I also do a lot of tribal consultation. So there are 49 tribes that have ties to Colorado. We connect a lot of them. So if we're doing a big project, we make sure that we reach out and connect with them. We work most closely with the Southern Ute and the Ute Mountain Ute. But we do like archaeological monitoring. We do all kinds of things. But overall, conservation is absolutely, both in the archaeology world and in my land management world, it's all about that. I tell my staff that all the time. If there's one job we have, it is stewardship, whether that's connecting the original stewards and making informed decisions in how we manage properties or how we inspire other people to be good stewards. It is all about connection and conservation.
Wow. These are impressive women. I'm so honored to be up here. So I'm Lori Weigel. I am the principal of Newbridge Strategy. We're an opinion research firm, and I literally named my firm in as a response to the idea of connection and how do I communicate and convey a connection, and a bridge was sort of a perfect metaphor for that. Because today we often look at even our friends, our neighbors, and think, wow, there's just massive divides everywhere we look. But I tend to find that often we have a lot in common and that we can create connections. I do a lot of work in opinion research related to conservation, which is why I'm up here. And one of the things that we tend to see is that, when my kids were little, they would say, well, I didn't have one of those jobs that was easy to identify. I'm not a firefighter or whatever. And they'd say, well, what do you do, mommy? And I'd say, well, I listen to people. And I think that is really the first step in creating connection, is listening and understanding how people talk, and then reflecting that back. And that's one of the challenges that I see related to conservation. I tell people that I'm a conservative conservationist, and there's a reason for that, because the root words are the same. That when we think about the root word and where it came from, that we're really thinking about preserving something. And whether that's traditions and structures, or whether that is preserving nature, I tend to think it is more efficient and effective to be able to not mess something up in the first place. It costs a lot more to restore something, as many of y'all know from your conservation work, than it is to preserve it in the first place. And so that's also why I'm on the board of Mountain Area Land Trust and take that very seriously, because the work that the land conservation community is doing and land trusts are doing around the state is vital to making sure that we are really preserving those important areas.
So incredible to have you all here. You are all so impressive. Lori, we're going to stay with you
Oh, dear.
for the first question. You have done such interesting work capturing public opinion on conservation, as you just mentioned. What are your biggest takeaways from your conversations with the public that highlight how different groups of people feel about conservation? And how are those views similar or different? And what can we do to tap more into people's shared beliefs around conservation?
Sure. So maybe I'll turn the question back on y'all. So they asked us, because I do ask questions too, I don't just listen, but they asked us if we're conservationists. What would you guess the proportion of Coloradans who say that they identify as a conservationist? Any guesses? Oh, I heard one that was really close. So it's 66%. That was as of 2 years ago. We conduct, on behalf of Colorado College, we conduct annual surveys every year in January, looking at the 8 interior states of the Mountain West, Colorado being one. And we've asked that question consistently over the years. So 2/3 is not bad, right? It's not terrible. We'd love for it to be 90%. If we ask people, do you consider yourself to be an environmentalist? Any guesses? It's not quite that low. It's not 23, but it's usually about 20 points lower, because that term has become politicized, right? And so different groups of people now look at those words very, very differently. And so we know, for example, that language matters. We do tend to see that, and again, just in January, well, actually every single day this past year, we've been listening to people talking about lots of conservation issues. And, there's a lot more in common than we would think, especially, I mean, I try and bridge divides often along partisan lines, but whether it's someone living in a rural area versus someone living in a city, they may not have exactly the same perspective, but those core values often come down to really respect for a number of things. I often refer to 3 W's that we talk about, that we see in the conservation space. Water. I know I was sitting at the water table. I felt very honored because, right, we're all drinking something related to water, and we know that water quality is really important. Wildlife. People want to conserve wildlife. They want to protect the laws that are now in place and do not want to see those diminish. And they very much feel that wildlife are more threatened today. Honestly, when we tell them the actual problems related to wildlife, it's kind of scares the heck out of them because we are losing so many species. And then way of life. And a lot of that can be related to food. It can be related to traditional livelihoods that relate back to food, whether that's farmers. If I'm doing work in Louisiana, that might be talking about shrimpers. That might be talking about crabs in Chesapeake Bay. So, I mean, a lot of that can be related to food. It also can be related to our outdoor recreation. And when we ask Coloradans to tell us what they like most about living in the state, any guesses what they say? Yeah, it's the outdoors. It's something related to nature and the outdoors, and that is dominant. I've even asked people, what's a core Colorado value? And they will primarily talk about the outdoors. So that is a shared value. How we talk about things can be off-putting. It can create artificial barriers, or it can bridge connections. And so a lot of the work we do is understanding how to communicate what we're really trying to do and achieve in the conservation space.
Thank you. Anna, you're up next. We know that conservation plays an important role in protecting our cultural resources, our natural habitats, and our stunning open spaces. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the role public lands play in your experience in connecting all kinds of people to their environment, to conservation, and to culture.
That's a big question. I would say, of course, public lands are extremely important. Like I mentioned before, Garden of the Gods Park is a city-owned park, but we estimated 5.2 million visitors last year. That is more than Yosemite, more than the Grand Canyon, more than nearly any national park. And so that's, of course, one of our struggles, but it's also a huge strength for us. And so getting that connecting people, it's easy to do in Garden of the Gods Park as far as we have the audience. And so we have so many educational opportunities. I always kind of laughed when I first got to Parks and Rec because they were, touting some of these newer ideas of like leave no trace and things like that. And I'm thinking like from an Indigenous perspective, that's, yep. We know. And so it's just always been something that we need to get more out in the public. I was born and raised here in Colorado Springs. And when I think about, visiting Garden of the Gods as a teenager or as a college student, I'm sure anybody who was born and raised here probably did that and probably was breaking some park rules. I certainly was. And so, but I think about it at the time, the educational opportunities were not the same. If I am doing archaeology in Garden of the Gods Park and I'm wearing a backpack that's covering my park staff on the back or something, and I'm off trail because I'm looking at a site, I will nearly every time have a random person tell me, hey, you're off trail, you need to get back on trail. And we have that happen all the time. There will be somebody flying a drone. We don't allow drones in the park. And people will be telling him, you're standing right next to a sign that says no drones. And so it's that education, I think, opportunity for us that's changed drastically, I think, in the last 20 or so years. And to me, from an Indigenous perspective, that's all coming back around, right? Those things have always been known. Those things have, if you are connected to the land at all, whether it's because your food is being grown from there, or it's because of your water source, or because you're living off of it. But now, especially for Coloradans, like Lori was saying, It's if you're recreating, if you are out there enjoying it, riding your bike or going for a hike or climbing the rocks, then that idea of giving something back. Humans are part of the ecosystem. And that is something that has been lost for a long time, I feel like, in broader culture. We're not separate from the ecosystem. What we do impacts everything. And so in the park, we often talk about resources over people. We need to protect the resources, but it's pretty equal, right? We don't exist without the other. And so, I mean, the resources would be a-okay without us, right? But it is about protecting that. It's another indigenous concept, is looking ahead 7 and 8 generations. What are we doing now that's impacting those things? And so public lands, of course, we need to keep those things open. Sometimes I think those of us in land management get a little bit freaked out about, and I certainly do, about how many people visit these places, and we are always afraid of loving things to death. And so that is a major challenge, but it's also, like I said, a big strength that we have these places that so many people love. People have big feelings about places like Garden of the Gods Park because of those connections. One last thought that I'll share is, I mentioned working in Hawaii, and we were talking about a specific place in Hawaii. It was called Moku'ula. And this is a place that a lot of the native people, the native Hawaiians, see as the center of the Hawaiian world. They call it the piko, the navel of the Hawaiian world. And I remember sitting there in a public meeting, and this guy got up, and in indigenous world, you are related to those places. Those places are relatives, the plants and the animals and those things. And how do we take care of our relatives? And so he got up and he was talking about Moku'ula. And he said, I cannot say it more clearly. I am Moku'ula. Moku'ula is me. And that is the type of conservation that we need. That's the type of connection that we need. And our public places that welcome people with their stunning views and their recreational opportunities. That's our opportunity right there.
Susan, you've led a career that is both impressive and varied. How have you carried the thread of conservation, intentionally or unintentionally, through your work? And has conservation ever connected to your work in unexpected ways?
Oh, yes. So I'm so glad actually to follow Anna, because a lot of what she had to say resonated. I'll come back to it. But as I said at the beginning, I started my career thinking about giant public lands, wilderness protection, Endangered Species Act, the kind of panoply of federal environmental laws and natural resources laws that we are kind of the foundation of our system of public lands. And that was where I spent the first 10 years of my career. And at some point, for a variety of reasons, I kind of switched horses, and I accepted a job at DU where I was running the Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute, which is focused on urban land use, zoning, city planning, transportation, housing, and in some ways not at all conservation oriented, right? And so I started the job because a friend of mine who I'd worked with at Earth Justice a decade or more before, probably 20 years before actually, convinced me that he was an Endangered Species Act expert, and we'd worked together on public lands issues. And he was like, I think you might find something here you would like. And so I was like, I'll try it. I'll just try it and see what I think. And one of the very first meetings that I went to was organized by another policy kind of think tank organization out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, called the Lincoln Institute for Land Policy. And they hosted a meeting at CU called Universities as Catalysts for Conservation. And I was like, yeah, count me in on that one. I am all about how to figure out how to link my passion for conservation and environmental protection from the previous 15 or 20 years of my career to the land use piece. And so it really got me thinking about the connection. And I said a few minutes ago that I see urban planning and zoning and transportation and housing and how we build our communities through the lens of conservation and environmental protection, and the way that we create healthy, thriving places for people, right? Because people are part of the environment. And so one of the things that grew out of that, some of that thinking, was literally maybe this, one of the things Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute does is it convenes a big conference every March that is kind of a annual interdisciplinary land use conference. We talk about all kinds of things. We talk about water and federal lands and local lands and just kind of everything. And the very first year, in fact, my predecessor in the job had planned the conference, so I didn't have anything to do with it, but the theme was wilderness in the city. And there was an organization that came to speak. I didn't invite them. Again, the conference was really set by the time I got there, but it was the executive director of an organization called Chicago Wilderness. And the vision of Chicago Wilderness was that cities and people live in ecological spaces, right? That we are part of the environment, and we have to figure out how to live in an ecosystem that we hopefully can figure out how to coexist within and operate within, and so that both nature and people can thrive. And in the case of Chicago Wilderness, it was really interesting because it covered like 4 different states, like Wisconsin, Chicago, Indiana, and Michigan. It was like this landscape scale, like ecological landscape around the whole Great Lakes area, thinking about the connectivity of habitat and water and the airshed, and really thinking about what conservation means in cities and why that is so important. And so I was with friends of mine at the time. I used to be on a board member of the Nature Conservancy. So I was sitting there with like the state director of the Nature Conservancy and the state director of the Trust for Public Lands. And we kind of all looked at each other and said, let's do that, right? We need something like that. So from that like aha moment was born an organization that exists now called the Metro Denver Nature Alliance, which is a regional kind of Denver Regional Council of Government, 7-county organization of federal, state, and local governmental agencies, nonprofit agencies, neighborhood organizations. And the goal of that organization, which Colorado Parks and Wildlife is now helping to fund, is to create a regional vision for people in nature that is equity centered. So we know that many parts of our community have really good access to nature and the benefits of nature, the health benefits of nature, whether it's the ability to do recreation or clean air or clean water or healthy food. And there are other parts of the region that don't. And so the idea is to really look intentionally at where the ecological bottlenecks are, where the ecological connectivity is, how people are related to those pressure points, and really thinking about how we can pull together dozens and dozens of different organizations and people, but it's really an organization of organizations, to think collectively about what our shared values are, what our shared vision of this region is, what we value most, and ultimately the goal is to think collectively about where we want to grow and how and where we want to restore or preserve really important ecological assets. And so it is like the flip side of the urban development is what are we going to protect and why and how. And so we've created a regional conservation assessment. We have created a regional equity assessment so that we can really start to look at how the benefits of nature are unequally distributed across the region. And so that, I mean, I've learned so much from that now decade-long process about the importance of the human connection within that urban space. And it's both because it's so important that the urban part of my work is thinking about compact and efficient development that doesn't sprawl, right? Because that helps to protect the farming lands, that protects the biodiverse areas around cities. But it's equally important, right? As we do that more densification of our lived spaces, to make sure that we are really intentional about the natural systems within that space. And because it's important for human health, it's important for our connection to the land, it's important so that people can recreate and love nature close to home, so that they are not going every weekend to the mountains to love our most precious wilderness spaces to death. Like it's really an important part of, I think, our sustainability and the way that we as communities create spaces that allow us to thrive as human beings. So that was a kind of a long-winded answer, but it's like there's two sides of the coin, right? There's the urban piece and there's the conservation piece. And to me, they really have to go together.
Patience. So with Food to Power, part of the amazing work that you do includes redirecting surplus food to nonprofit and community programs. Where do you see intersections between food justice, community connection, and conservation?
That's a great question. I think food systems really do illuminate inequities in environmental structures. So when you think about the communities that are experiencing the most disparate access to fresh food, it is not apart from income, it's not apart from time poverty or limited transportation access, where groceries are and are not, how cities were designed, who benefits, policies like redlining, disinvestment, all of those affect how and why people are able to access food, but they also affect the environmental structure. So where we're located, and we have 3.5 acres of land in the Hillside neighborhood, is a historically Black neighborhood, and we are a stone's throw from the wastewater treatment facility, tire processing facility, and trash transfer station. And, no surprise that Southeast processes more trash than other parts of the city. So we know the work that we are doing to, re-divert food scraps from landfills and not let them be processed into waste, but actually feed our soil, that then feeds our plants, that then feeds our bodies, is affecting the same folks who are experiencing the life expectancy differences that are affected in food equity, air quality, cleanliness of water, et cetera. And those things were by design. And so in order to remediate those things, we also have to be bold and by design, mitigate those harms. And so also being able to connect people to space where they're able to reclaim some of that knowledge in learning how to grow food, in connecting in community around food. If I see something in the grocery program, for instance, that a vegetable I've just never had relationship with or experience, my family didn't cook it, but I'm there in community with someone else who is cooking it and knows what to do with it, then I feel less intimidated to add that to my palate. And so creating space where, again, people can connect in community around food, but also environmental stewardship to help reclaim that knowledge is affecting health equity, not just from directly what you're eating, but also because we're sequestering, to date, 2.5 million pounds of fresh food scraps that have turned into compost and are feeding our soil.
All right, Yenny. As Outdoor Equity and Education Director with the Boys and Girls Club, your work connects young people to the outdoors. Can you share with us a story that illustrates how outdoor access impacts young people?
Yes, I feel like I have so many stories, especially in my line of work. I mean, I think for me, one thing we spoke about this actually in a previous launch meeting. Pueblo right now is currently in the process of creating an outdoor coalition. And one thing I always think with our youth is this is the time for them to play. Pueblo itself is a low-income community, and we have youth that do not have a lot of access to these outdoor spaces outside their neighborhoods. Consistently, we're actually going through community listening sessions and youth advisory groups. You hear a lot about safety. They don't feel safe in their own neighborhood. And so outdoor access is so important, and just being able to see them go out there and be kids is huge. So I mean, there's so many different things for me. I know we have, for Boys and Girls Club, we have about 12 sites now in Pueblo, which we serve over 2,000 youth, all the way from kindergarten up to 12th grade. And so when running programs, it's like what, you're running programs for each age group, but how do you scaffold that into pathways for, future opportunities? And one thing I love with my job is we have Girl Scout troops within our clubhouses, 5 Girl Scout troops. And I helped start that within our clubhouses, and our girls love the outdoors. It is so fun. It's just been great to take them out fishing. We've gone to Girl Scout camps. They're really experiencing these things that some of them may have never had those experiences before. And this last couple of years, we've been really fortunate to be able to go to Lazy Acres, which is a Girl Scout camp nearby over in Rye. And Girl Scouts, with that wonderful partnership, has offered that for free for our parents and our kids. And so all the outdoor activities we have with our organization are free. The only time we ever charge is just a small deposit fee of $20. Make sure they actually show up because they'll get it back. But everything else, even if they can't afford it, we will never charge them. And so with these opportunities like Lazy Acres, my first year, we provided transportation up to that camp. And I had a mom who said, like, we have not been outdoors since their father passed. And that to me was like, wow. They just didn't feel comfortable driving in the mountains, which is why, they wanted that transportation. And so, I mean, just to see them have this opportunity with their 2 little girls was just everything. And we did that again this last year, but it was an overnight trip. And I mean, just hearing the girls talk about it, I mean, that to me is having those experiences. And if it's their first time ever doing anything like this, those are memories that are going to last. And so I just feel like that's so important when we're talking about outdoor access. I know it's not equitable for everybody, and making sure, we're reducing those barriers.
So now a question for all of you, same question to each of you. What's one of the most pressing challenges? And conversely, what do you see as some of the greatest opportunity in your work as it relates to our theme of conservation and connection? We're going to start with you, go back down this way. And since there are a lot of you, quicker answers. I could listen to you all night, but they will kick us out at a certain point.
I think for Pueblo is environmental justice. I think a lot of people, especially our youth and Pueblo community, especially some of those low income neighborhoods. We have this Y zone in Pueblo, who live near the highways. Air quality isn't as great. I think that's just so important with conservation and connecting them to the importance of why they should care about their local neighborhoods. I think Pueblo, I always say, is a hidden gem of a town. We have all those wonderful outdoor spaces. We have the Arkansas River that runs through, and even taking, youth and families out there to connect and see the importance of, protecting those areas. And so that just to me, I feel like is, one of those challenges that in my line of work can really create opportunity.
I would say in El Paso County, inclusion in the economic piece of land access, capital to steward that land. You can create entire circular economies that are not diverse at all, and particularly in El Paso County. And so really creating circular economies and systems that are inclusive of folks of color who are not just in the pantry line, but they're actually owning land, they're stewarding land, and they're able to participate in the economic piece.
It's hard to pick one, but I I agree actually with both of these comments in terms of opportunities and challenges. I guess I would add to the mix that land is pretty scarce in cities. And so really thinking about the way, I think the biggest challenge is the competing demand for space, whether it's for housing, affordable housing, whether it's for schools and public sector, resources that we need, or nature, right? And nature is often competing with other uses. And so, but the opportunity there is to really, in very strategic ways, think about all the many ways that like an acupuncture kind of approach to nature can really benefit communities in significant ways to address environmental justice, to address food justice, to address health benefits, and to stewardship, and to connect local communities to a very small park, right, that is access to nature for them and is an opportunity for stewardship and for love and caring, I think can really pay dividends over the long term in terms of a sense of responsibility for this place we call home on planet Earth. And so I really think the challenge is the opportunity and being very strategic about how we use land to create many, many different benefits.
I would say it's two kind of opposing things for me. One, I think when I think of Garden of the Gods Park, is loving it to death, that there's just so much. And of course, the antidote to that is education, among other things. Some of it, as far as like an archaeology perspective, or some of our other park properties or other properties that are not yet being preserved, is the resources to do those kinds of things. So Colorado Springs has the TOPS tax, which is 0.1% of sales tax that goes, and so we have several, and it goes toward conservation of public lands. And of course, Palmer Land Trust does those kinds of things as well. But it's educating people about why those places are important, about all of the different types of resources, and that's how we use archaeology to bring people in. A lot of people are not aware what archaeology is or that it's important, but it's about all of those resources and what they can bring to all of us. And so in Garden of the Gods, our main thing is always education first. So if we see people breaking rules or things like that, it's always about education first before we move on to anything else. And so it really does come down to an individual one-by-one person basis in a lot of ways. But those are the challenges, but again, it's also the opportunities for us. And so education is what we need.
So. Okay. I don't have that good of ways to reach all the way over there. Thank you, though. So I've been working a lot more on federal policy. I think one of our big challenges right now is that if you ask people, do you want to reduce federal government spending? By and large, people will say, sure, I want to reduce federal government spending. If you ask them, should we reduce funding to the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and a host of other federal government agencies that oversee national public lands, our water quality, our wildlife, and all of that, then they'll resoundingly say no. In fact, 80% of Coloradans said no, they don't want to do that to those particular agencies. I think our biggest opportunity is having elected officials that are not elected basically in primaries by very small groups of people. And I think open primaries would solve a host of problems at the federal level that we're seeing manifest right now, that you'd have people that are elected more from the broader populace and not a very small group of people. And I think that's something that I think electoral reform would potentially be an antidote. I liked your word, be an antidote to some of the problems and challenges we're facing today.
So we're now moving on to a crowd favorite that we do every year, and this is the lightning round. So these are quick answers, one word, just a couple words. We're going to go down the line pretty fast. I have a handful of them. Lori, we're going to start with you. But this is a question for all of you. You'll each answer it. We'll start with Lori, though. Are you an optimist, idealist, pragmatist, or pessimist, Lori?
I'm definitely glass half empty, but I'm grateful I have a glass.
Well, there's an answer. Anna. Oh,
Optimist all the way. I think life is good. Places are beautiful. Optimist.
Susan.
Optimist with a pragmatic streak.
Patience.
Optimist, idealist. If we don't have hope, what do we have?
Yenny.
I work with kids, so optimist. I
And we're going to start with you this time. Who inspires you?
think there's a lot of females that have inspired me. I know there's a whole group over there thinking about over in Pueblo area. But honestly, I have some really powerful females in my family. My mom, who is a badass lady, has really introduced me to the outdoors and just, you know, the importance of caring for it. Both my sisters, they're just some of the most outspoken people I've ever met. And I wish I was always 1% of them. So really, those are the people that inspire me.
Patience.
I unfortunately was not able to meet my grandparents on my father's side or my great-grandparents on my mother's side. My mother is biracial and her family comes from Zacatecas and Chihuahua, but both of sides of my family grew food, and it was their pathway here, and it also provided hope. And so when I am doing this work or when I encounter hardness in this work, I try to remember their journey, to gather inspiration from it, because I stand on their shoulders. They were doing that work, imagining my generation and what that would look like. And so I hope to be able to be that person for my great-grandchildren.
Wow. Susan.
Okay, cannot top that. I have many wonderful mentors in my life, but I think that my inspiration comes from my students. Oftentimes, they are hardworking law students who are just starting out and are full of grit and determination and are, you know, passionately committed to the rule of law and passionately committed in my classes to sustainability and to the future of our planet. And so they give me tremendous hope.
Anna.
I mean, I'd say lots of people, lots of friends and family, and, you know, even my own local community. But if I had to say really solidly, I think about the people, my ancestors that came before and the people that will come after. So the things that my ancestors had to endure for me to be here, sitting right here, right now, is staggering. But also that idea of looking at 8 generations ahead and my children and their children and the children after them and after them. That's what more could you ask for inspiration than that?
Lori.
Sure. I remember going into rooms in Washington, D.C., where I lived prior to Colorado. Often it was all men all the time. And one of the reasons I think I gravitated towards conservation is there's a lot of badass women working in conservation every day on the front lines. There's great park rangers and wildland firefighters and women out there that are doing amazing things, and they really inspire me.
Awesome. Okay, we have a couple more, a little more lightning, all right? Lori, we're gonna stick with you. Go-to book recommendation.
Oh, okay. Now you'll know why I'm a pessimist out of a range of optimists. There's a great book, Generations. They have a cyclical theory of U.S. history. They have been dead on for years, William Strauss and Neil Howe. And unfortunately, they predicted a crisis era for the United States starting in 2020. So we're only halfway through it, people. So unfortunately.
Anna.
Braiding sweetgrass.
Susan.
Abundance by Ezra Klein.
Oh, I've heard so many interviews about that. So good. Patience.
My grandmother's hands.
Yenny.
The Alchemist.
Solid. Yes. Okay, we're sticking with you. What's your favorite way to connect with the outdoors?
Skiing. Fly fishing second, but skiing number one. Yeah.
Patience.
Getting my hands in the soil.
Susan.
Walking in my neighborhood.
Anna.
I would say being alone and being able to just soak it all in.
Lori.
I'm definitely a summer person, so hiking.
Yes. Okay, this is the last one. What words of wisdom would you share with the next generation of leaders to aid in their success? Lightning, I know hard, but short paragraph.
Short paragraph? Okay. I got two things. So there is a minister from Colorado Springs, Paula Stone Williams, who has said the only people who don't get lost are the ones who don't go anywhere. I have that taped to my desk so I can see it every day because at some point you'll get lost. And when you do, you have to, someone just said this at a conference I was at, and I loved it. And that's taped up above this. He says, you have to get close, get curious, and get creative. When you're stuck or lost, as the case may be, you got to get close, get curious, get creative. And that was really inspiring to me.
Anna.
It's a hard one. I would say, good leaders are always learning, are always questioning, are always open to learning new things from different people. And I think it's like parenting. If you are questioning your parenting, then that probably means you're a decent parent. So, so I'd say, yeah, being open and just keep moving forward. It's easy to doubt ourselves, but one foot in front of the other.
Susan.
So I think people are full of surprises. And so I think I would say to young leaders, it's important not to judge. And it's important to be maintain open-minded curiosity. That's been a theme. And to be opportunistic and looking for ways to move the needle, because you never know when your opportunity is going to come around the corner.
Patience.
I would say being willing to connect in intergenerational relationships. I think often, our society tells us to throw our elders away, and there's so much beauty and wisdom and just learning, being able to sit at the feet of our elders, but also just being that to someone else. So having, folks that you are mentoring, and then also putting yourself in a position to be mentored just really opens up wonder and curiosity and so much learning.
Yenny.
Gonna say, maybe just in the field I've been in, and just previous fields is really just, if your voice is different than others in the room, that doesn't mean you're wrong. You just have a very different perspective and experience. And yeah, just have that confidence. I think that can be, especially going into outdoor spaces at times, always being, younger female of color, it can be difficult. But just, I think that's, you're not wrong. It's a little bit different.
That was the end of the lightning round. So I have one last final question to wrap us up, non-lightning. So take your time. Lori, we'll start with you. What do you think is the single most important thing we can do to welcome more Coloradans to the conservation table?
Well, I think it's something you said right at the outset. I think, to be honest, you stole my line. So I think that it is people want to know what's in it for them. Like I work on ballot measures, I work on lots of policy issues, and you pick up, your ballot or whatever, and you look at it and you say, okay, the first thing you have to think of is like, how does this affect me? Right? I mean, you can't help it. You just do. And so sometimes, and I used to work with someone who carried around a brownie box with them because they would say, it was their prompt for saying, hey, you're getting too far in the weeds. Because when you walk down the aisle in the grocery store, there's, and you're in the cake mix and brownie boxes, right? They've got the yummy, chewy, chocolatey brownie on the front of the box, right? That's why you buy the box. That's why you pick it up, right? It's to get that end product. They don't put the back of the box facing out, right? Because the back of the box has the process, the directions, probably the calories even. And nobody buys it for that, right? And so I tend to find, especially in the environmental space, that a lot of time gets spent when we're thinking about policy on the back of the box, like what's the process we're going to go through? How do we get there? All that kind of stuff. And that's not how you communicate, right? In all that process, people just get lost. We have to stay on what's in it for them. Why are they picking, stay on the front of the brownie box and talk about what's in it for them. And that could be food, right? It could be traditions. It could be places you've gone with your family. When we talk about national parks and why they may need funding and not have it cut, it's people talk about when they were 8 years old and their family went to this park, right? I mean, they still remember that. It's clean air and clean water. It's our health that we've talked about already. So it's all these things that we've talked. It's having your kids not be on screens, right? And having them connect with each other and play. And there's a great Ezra Klein one on talking about that problem that we're having with kids right now and how it's affected their mental health. So there are so many antidotes in nature that we just need to make sure that we're talking about it in a way that people see, oh, this affects me or my children or my community. And that's why we need to take this action, invest in this, or protect what we have.
Anna.
I would say that we're all at the table for the most part already in the daily actions that we take and in the way that we behave on a daily basis. What do you give back to the land, and what do you contribute in the way that you vote, in the way that you care for the places that you love, volunteering? That all these things are ways that we live in our ecosystem. And so it's a mindset as well. And that's something that's a daily basis kind of thing. Of course, it can be in bigger concepts. One of the things that we do to educate people that we'd like to do soon, it's probably years away, but we're working with the Colorado Springs Fire Department to talk about fuel mitigation and why fire is part of the ecosystem, and that it's a tool, it's a relative, and that is something that is healthy for the ecosystem. But when you talk about burning in someone's backyard, that's a little bit different of a story. So it's something that's attention grabbing. It's something that is an educational tool that we can all use, that would make headlines and things like that. But so those are bigger things, but I think for us, it's just keeping in mind that it's a daily thing. Conservation is an everyday action that we take, whether we realize it or not. And so making sure that people are educated on that as well.
So I think that the bottom line is that we need to meet people where they are, and really recognize that different people have different relationships to nature, and sometimes it's complicated. And so for some people, it's planting flowers in their backyard or their front yard. And for some people, it's a memory or a tradition of having picnics in the park. For others, it's going to the mountains to, recreate in our beautiful public lands. But I think it all matters, actually. And the most important thing is for people to have a connection to the land and a connection to the place and an appreciation for how it supports them. And so I really think the way to bring more people into conservation is to define it much more broadly and to define it as everything. And it's kind of like an ethos as opposed to a practice, I would say.
I would say getting young people connected to where their food comes from, and having the experience of just getting their hands in the soil, understanding the soil web, having relationship to food. It doesn't come from the grocery store. There's lots of research that shows, if a child pulls a carrot out of the ground, their lifelong relationship with that carrot has now just changed fundamentally for the rest of their life. And so when we're talking about health equity and when we're talking about diet related disease, a lot of that is shaped by the environment. If the convenience store is your grocery store, and because of a whole host of intersectional issues, it's more time efficient and cost effective for you to hit up the dollar menu than to go to the grocery store. Being able to have space where you're able to grow, whether that's your patio, your backyard, whatever space that you have, I think just fundamentally changes young people's perspective of their relationship to the land and how the land produces and how we have to also be reciprocal in our caring for it so that it continues to do that for our generation, but also the ones coming after us.
Annie.
Few things I thought about with this question. I think the first one was, inviting people to the table, I think is huge. Especially those that may not normally be seen in those spaces. Like recently I invited, there's a group in Pueblo called Divine Connections, and they do a lot with gang intervention. But I don't think anyone's talked to them about what does outdoor space look like for their youth. So just thinking about those people you normally wouldn't invite into these spaces, and I think that's a big one, even for myself and most of my career. I feel like I serve on the TU board, but the vice president, Jason Hochever, asked, hey, are you interested? I would have never thought about that for myself. So I think those things are really important. Another one is just, having those once in a lifetime experiences and memories. Those are huge. Like I can look back on those moments I've had in my life with nature that have really transformed my life. And I think a lot about with kids and families who maybe aren't thinking about conservation in that way. But, once they've been to certain places, they're like, wow, now I have a connection and why should I care now? So.
Wow, thank you. That is it for this panel. What an incredible just font of wisdom from all of you sharing your experience, your passion. Please, let's give the entire panel one last round of applause. Rock stars. You guys are rock stars. Oh, incredible. And please, one more round of applause for our sponsors, our board, our staff, and certainly the committee. We have a little bit more planned for you tonight. I know a bunch of people just looked at their watches. Hold tight. We have one last chapter. It's fun. There's dessert. But before we do that, I want to wrap us up here and turn our attention now to you all. First of all, with a hearty thank you for taking time out of your very busy days to be with us tonight, to be here and share in this experience of expanding our minds, our horizons, gaining different perspectives. Thank you all. And I have an invitation. I have 3 invitations, in fact, for each of you. The first is if you heard something tonight that inspired you, maybe got you thinking about something in a different way, maybe something that challenged you, to go back and share it with a friend, a colleague, a neighbor, a family member, your circle of influence. That is an incredibly powerful way to keep this conversation going and spread it with a ripple effect throughout our community, our greater regional community. The second, if you are not already connected to Palmerland Conservancy as a donor or a member, I invite you to do that. Your direct financial contribution powers our conservation work. It powers bringing communities together, like through this event. There is a QR code on the back of your program that you can use to become a donor. Those of you who already are, thank you so much. I know there are many of you in this room who have been strong supporters for a very, very long time. Finally, the third invitation is to follow the work of these amazing women and their organizations, their programming, go to their events, support them financially. And to do that, there's another QR code on the inside on this speaker page. Please go there and check out the amazing work that is being done by these incredible women. So the last chapter of our evening, we've done this for 9 years, right? And we've gotten a lot of feedback. And one piece of feedback we have continually gotten from you all is that here we went to the trouble of gathering so many amazing women here in the audience, and you all want to know one another better. You want to have conversations with somebody you've just met. You want to continue thinking about this, and most importantly, you want to meet who else is in this room. So we've added that tonight. We're calling it Dessert and Discussion. So we are going to be passing around dessert to your tables. There are 2 questions on your tables, and they'll also come up on the screen that can help guide you in conversation with those at your table. Feel free to move around, mingle, but the idea is to really now have this conversation in a small group with other inspiring people here in the audience. So with that, I invite you to stay, have dessert. We have the room until 8 p.m., so we have a fair bit of time. And thank you all so much for being here tonight. It truly is an honor and a gift to spend time with all of you, and it's been an incredible honor to talk with all of you. Thank you for being here.